Hi, Misha here, and I got bored. They're not new to the market, but let's talk about the Stribogs. At least I presume it's Stribog. The SP9A1 with the OEM brace, full size for what it's worth, and the SP9A3, the more compact version with brace, both 9mm, and they both take the newer kind of curved standard capacity mags, which are supposedly a update, improvement over the originals, and I believe it. These are interesting. We don't get a lot of guns from Slovakia, the other half of Czechoslovakia. We think of Czech Republic with all the CZ product. Well, this is the other half. Grand Power started off with a pistol. It's had not exactly a smooth sailing road since they were introduced, but keep in mind, it's essentially a brand new company. I don't know, these are considered kind of budget options, especially the A1 version here. And there have been plenty of videos, but we do a lot of pistol caliber, in this case pistols. These are both 9x19. So we'll go over them, all that good stuff. But as always, if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to help support us, check out Patreon, and apologies in advance for the neighbor mowing, but it's about to become a lot hotter out here, so I don't blame him a bit. With that, let's kind of dive in, look at their history, then we'll talk mechanics and go on from there. So to begin our table talk portion here, this is the case they come in, and it's not bad. It's not too big. Sometimes I've noticed guns today, to try to make themselves look more impressive, come with obnoxiously large cases. And opening it up, pretty standard inside. This is just the plastic bag the gun comes in. We do get a small but reasonably decent manual, more than you get a lot these days. We get an alternative set of sights. I believe they actually are a different profile, not just straight up replacements, front and rear. Here is the original end cap, but instead of just being like a pistol end cap with just a sling slot, it does have a rather large pick rail, and there is a QD slot in the bottom, so I guess that would be where you could expect to have your sling swivel if you had it on. And that just pops on and off. Cut out for the gun, and cut out for the 3 supplied mags. The current versions are all coming with 3 curved current generation mags. Older ones, you would see the straight mags, and they kind of did a hybrid where you get a couple of straight mags and a curved, or a couple of curved and a straight, but it seems like the newer ones are just all curved all the time. And they're kind of a semi-dark, but still translucent. And I do actually like how they lay in here kind of staggered. Just how it seems aesthetically fun. So you see there's a little extra space in here. They could have probably made this case a little bit smaller, but not by much. It's pretty good space utilization. Now there is not a cleaning kit, which frankly isn't all that useful, but mostly the fact that you get 3 mags, not 2 or even 1, which we see a lot these days. The most useful comparison, especially for the original A1 Stribog, would of course have to be with the CZ Evo 3 Scorpion. Naturally, this is from the Czech Republic, this is from Slovakia. But the Scorpion, the initial logo design it was based on back around 2003-2004, came from a Slovak designer. I don't know, there's just a little bit of commonality there. Of course, the Scorpion Evo 3 went into production around 2009-2010. Both are 9mm. Even though both use different mags, they're double stack, double feed, just a different style. Both have an 8-inch barrel. and very similar length to the receiver. Interestingly, the CZ has a polymer shell on the upper, and this is aluminum alloy extrusion, but that's okay. And they both, of course, have a hinge. Of course, this has a bridge. This has the stock. It's adjustable. And pistol grip. Yeah, I will give one credit here, and this is, of course, the Generation 2 thing. The trigger is quite a bit nicer on the Stribog versus the Evo 3 trigger. You know, that just has to be said. Of course, a lot of people have upgraded it. And honestly, the price point isn't that far off between the two. The Grand Power Company started off around the turn of the millennium, 2001, 2002. I know some places have it as 2012. That is incorrect. That's actually a repeated typo, because you start to see them having patents, or really the single owner having patents around 2007, 2008 with very early production, starting with the K1, later to be the K100 pistol, which I saw in America. I know it was before 2014. I cannot remember. I had to go back and look at my notes. But 2012, 2013. And so at that time, Century Arms was the importer. Of course, these days it's global. That's been bringing them in for about the last 5 years. Now, they were always kind of targeting the export market, the military market. And even to this day, the vast majority of their products are sold outside of Slovakia. Very remarkably similar. I'm not going to say they copy the Scorpion. This is quite different internally. It's a metal receiver, polymer. They are very different guns, but you can tell they were both going for that traditional full-size submachine gun, which typically those types of guns had a roughly an 8-inch up to about a 10-inch barrel. You know, like your classic Uzi, your Sten gun, things of that nature. And as we move on, you see it does fit, although very securely. a little snug, frankly, with the brace installed in the case. You probably want to leave it a little bit on the edges. It's close, but it's pretty tight. And as far as just shutting it up, yeah, you're going to have to fight that, but it will close down. Back here, while the neighbor's on the other side of the yard, mechanics are pretty straightforward. The newer A1 here has a non-reciprocating handle. See? Can be swapped to either side. Bolt release is just this big kind of metal flap. Mag release is double-sided, of course. Kind of standard for this day and time, frankly. The iron sights are kind of neat, because when they're folded down, you have small, and then you can flip them up to get more kind of miniature HK. And they even come with an alternative set in the box that we looked at that kind of gives you a somewhat larger style. Of course, it only ejects to the right, and the arm brace with the push button only folds to the right, quite stiff. It doesn't really lock on the side, but it's fine, I mean, for storage. And if you don't like that, you get the Picatinny rear plate. Besides, pistol grip is kind of fixed in. Safety is ambidextrous. No storage in the pistol grip, it's just hollow. Again, the newer ones have this flat style trigger, which feels pretty good. And you've got top and bottom pick rails. This is metal. And then you've got 2 M-lock slots. And then you're threaded 1/2 by 28. And I think it is kind of a cool look to have this flare on the barrel. But of course, practically speaking, that's just so it can be threaded and take a suppressor. And I do kind of like the stick out look. The frame is the full size, and this is, I believe, just right at an 8-inch barrel. So this is the original version, and Gen 2 of that. What about our little A3? The SP9 A3S. And to talk about it, well, This is a very obvious and important comparison. The APC9K Pro, because these were both entries into the SCW program that the U.S. military had in 2018. There was a bit of back and forth, but what's important, these are both down selected. There were half a dozen companies that were awarded contracts to produce prototypes, including suppressors for the trials. Now, obviously, the Burger and Thomat won in 2019, but this made it further than, frankly, I was expecting. And the version that was entered there, the AP9 A3S, is very similar. It had the short 5-inch barrel, threaded, same receiver style. Of course, it was select fire, not semi-automatic only. It did use the Stribog mags, but instead of having the folding stock, or in this case brace, it had a collapsible metal stock, because part of the second wave or kind of revised program that was implemented midway through 2018, they wanted an extendable adjustable telescoping stock versus folder. They just thought it would be quicker to deploy, and therefore what Grand Power ended up doing, they had two versions: the FS, the side folding stock version, and the CS, the collapsing stock version. And presumably they're interchangeable with just plugging into the rear. And in some ways these are even closer to each other than with the Scorpion, because they both have essentially an aluminum alloy kind of boxy upper with a polymer lower. Of course, the pistol grip is modular on the B&T, and it's fixed on the Grand Power, but hey, pick rails, top and bottom, side. And it's a blowback, but instead of using the roller, it uses a hydraulic buffer. Either way, they're both designed for recoil. Also, the charging handle in the APC, including having the open front end here, is actually very much like this. By the way, the version of the AP9 that was entered had dual handles, which would be easy enough to do. So both sides instead of reversible. Little differences like that. But if you wanted to, you could pretty easily turn in one of these into a SCW AP9 A3S clone or copy. Very similar to the A1 in terms of controls and features, including the side folding brace. In fact, I think they're exactly the same brace, same end piece, same style of sights. Top rail, bottom rail, much shorter, of course, because of the shorter frame. We have only one M-lock slot per side, and that's to correspond with the 5-inch barrel. It also flares, but it's kind of mostly hidden. It's also threaded half by 28. And this too is, of course, non-reciprocating, but it's a much easier gun to charge. And that's, of course, because it's not just a standard blowback, which is the whole deal with the A3. Now, of course, this is the version that takes the Stribog mags. You can get a Glock mag version, but I don't know. Since we do get 3 mags per gun, and the second gen mags seem to be a lot better. I'm not going to say perfect, they're the best in the world. I don't know. It makes it a little more unique. I understand why someone might want to go Glock mag, though. Now, the SCW version of the APC9 Pro is one of my favorite guns to shoot. It's just a lot of fun. So, as nice as the Stribog is, it's not going to do it. But keep in mind, the cost difference is exponential. Even the base model without the brace and everything is double what this is. And once you start tacking stuff on, you can easily get close to triple. But yeah, the Burger I'm talking about won. But I have to admit, this was kind of Stribog, Grand Power's kind of closest to coming to military adoption, at least on a certain level. and at least kind of put their name out there. And it was good timing too, because that was around the same time that Global Ordnance here released the semi-automatic SP9 series. That's they're the official importers after Century of Grand Power, and I don't recall Century ever bringing over any of the Stribogs. I think they were all under the Global trade name down in Florida, but if I'm wrong. So let's look inside the A1 here. Got a captive push pin in the front and back, but I really don't see any reason to remove the front pin, kind of like on an AR, unless you just need to. There's your trigger group. Pretty well AR style. And then you have this back piece here. It comes off kind of interesting. It pushes down and then kind of out. You got this, and then your bolt comes out. Now this piece is just a plastic piece in here with your handles, so you can push it out and swap it around if you need to. Very simple. And it actually is the same piece on both guns, but reversed. You'll see that in a minute. Notice how this is hollow up front here. Just keep that in mind. Metal, alloyed type upper. Quite light, very blocky, you know, relatively economy. And then we have our bolt group. So pretty standard. Got a little kind of nylon or synthetic type nylon. And what's interesting, this is not one piece. It actually separates. It has a dovetail. And it just slides through, see? I think that's neat. So you have your bolt here. Spring-loaded firing pin. This is relatively light. And then you have this essentially weight up here, which means in theory you could have different weights. Yes, this is oily. For your carrier. I mean, for maybe suppressor or not, different, you know, bullets, projectiles. It's an idea. Usually when you see straight blowback guns, this is all just one piece. So I think it's kind of interesting what they did here. And it fits in pretty nice. There's not a lot of wiggle and play. Now I found with both of these, especially the A3 when we get to it, but it's best to turn it upside down, or straight up I mean, and just kind of drop it in so that's more or less lined up. There's enough play that you don't have to have it exactly perfect, but you know, it helps. Let's push that in, tension, and push that up there. Pretty stiff. And that's after having it apart a few times already. And there it goes. So the pins are nice and secure. I will say this piece is a little stiff up here, but that's not a bad thing because it keeps it from oscillating, because it's not really locked in on a lot of other guns. It just is up there. And of course you do have a relatively stiff pull because it's still a blowback gun. It really is not a bad trigger. Now the A3. Same basic thing back here. And this is pretty much all the same. And I've learned that when I do this, because this is a little more convoluted inside, to be a little more careful. You'll see why. So, just before I get to that, this is that same piece, but notice it's solid here. But over here, it's hollow. So they basically just use the same end piece, but they flip it around. So same handle, same end piece, which makes perfect sense for their relatively inexpensive market they're going for. Now, when I first got this, I was like, that's not a roller delayed bolt. And this fell this straight out. This is our roller. It just kind of goes in here with tension. Now when this is forward, it's locked in. But when it cams up, sorry, it's hard to show you. That's your roller action, is this little head piece. So very different from an MP5. And you just have this little kind of floating piece in here. So when you take it apart, just make sure you know that. Of course, you can see where it's notched for it. And by doing that, this lets us have a very light bolt. Notice lightning cuts on each side. Still a spring-loaded firing pin. And it's interesting because this bolt can't actually separate from the top part. But then again, this head does. So in theory, you could have a different weighted head or a different weighted roller here, or a different style if you needed to. This is my really big complaint about this helicopter. What can you do? That needs to be, it needs to float, I understand. Seems like there should be some way to make that more captive. I'm not sure. I think if this ever saw military adoption, they'd have to do something about that, but I also understand why it needs to, you know, float free, because that's just how the action works. So again, especially with this one, you want to just point it upwards, and once it's in the receiver, it isn't really going anywhere. So you push it up and your bolt goes in. Back here, if I can line it up right. There we go. So that seems pretty much the same. The spring might be a different weight, probably is, because it is a lot easier to charge. Let's see. There we go. I think I got it out of the way. Yeah. You know, there's the same triggers, but I think that A1, just by, you know, virtue of manufacturing, has a slightly nicer trigger. But it's not a bad one, especially if you're a big fan of, like, the ALG. And it is an easier gun to charge. And pretty tiny, like this. So yeah, both of them are in some ways are mechanically very unique and interesting. At least, I think so. What do you think? And as we get to the end, here's the compact version in its case. It actually fits a little bit better because of the shorter front end with the brace installed. Still going to kind of bulge a bit when you close it. I also wanted to mention, I said it at the beginning of the video, I recall getting the original K100s in from Century. I was just curious, so I looked, and the first ones I logged in were in the fall of 2012. So what are my thoughts on the future of the Stribog? It's interesting that the Scorpion, the Evo 3, and a few others kind of revitalized the more or less full-size submachine gun market about 15, 20 years ago. But that quickly turned into the PDW, or subcompact. I don't foresee the full-size doing a whole lot one way or the other. If Grand Power is going to meet success, I think it will be with the smaller frame guns. And that probably explains why the A1 is really just the one version. The A3, there's the A3, the full size, but with the modern updates like the roller delayed lock system. There's the A3G, which is the Glock mag version I previously mentioned. As I said, this is the A3S. And there's even a 10mm version, although that's just in Europe right now. And they also do a SR9 A3, which is a carbine with a 10-inch barrel. And then they do the SR9 A3, which can be had with either a 13 or a 16-inch barrel. Slovakia has been wanting to get into the arms industry, and Grand Power, even though it's a relatively small company, under 100 employees, give or take, it's still pretty much the most prominent arms manufacturer in Slovakia. And before you kind of laugh at that, think about this. A lot of European nations, and of course England as well, basically have no small arms industry at all. So technically, Slovakia might have more than, say, England right now. But the former communist nations seem to really know and appreciate the ability to defend themselves and manufacture their own designs. And frankly, in the 21st century, some of the most interesting designs are coming out of that former Comblock range. Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, of course. And I'm really interested to see what else happens. Two-handed here to show you. Of course, the back parts are very similar. The difference is really in the front and in the internals, as you saw. Triggers are the same on both. Sights are the same. This one is noticeably lighter weight. It's obviously, 3 inches or so shorter. This was not just god-awful heavy. I mean, obviously with the bolt inside, you expect it to be. This one you can definitely tell. I'm curious, which style do you like, for the modern ones? Obviously, this is more of a traditional submachine gun length and kind of class and size. And it's possible the longer barrel and longer sight radius could give better practical accuracy. On the other hand, you have that big massive bolt moving back and forth, which kind of can produce more of a teeter-totter. And of course, it's more felt recoil, knocking off target. So possibly better first shot, but less tight groups. On the other hand, this is definitely more of a PDW size, kind of a modern style. And the roller system I did find very interesting the first time I looked at it. Less mass moving around, easier to charge, and ostensibly lighter recoiling. But of course you do have a shorter sight radius, or less room for an optic if you choose. Although, how much do you really need for this? And, 5-inch barrel versus 8, it could matter. One thing I will say, I do kind of wish this came with a hand stop. Just even a simple something, because you're really close there. So unless you attach something, I probably would, if I was going to put my hand up here and try to use it at all, I would probably put some kind of stopgap there. My choice. Yeah, fold it up like this. It's a nice little compact package. It did actually impress me just how much metal is in both of these. I mean, you think of an economy gun, it's going to be mostly plastic, and the lower certainly is. And you can certainly see the economies. I'm not going to pretend like these are as well made as, say a SIG or even a CZ. But, it's an import. It's at least mechanically unique, even this one. And I thought that was kind of neat. But what do you think? Have you owned either one? What's been your experience, yeah or nay? And again, which kind of style do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. Again, sorry for any kind of noise. Just, being outdoors, having to share outdoors with folks. But if you could, like, share, and subscribe. Like to help support us, check out Patreon. And also check out a lot of our previous videos on kind of the style class of firearm. Because imports, I'm going to be honest, guys, I don't care what they are, we're not going to have them forever. One way or the other, imports always stop coming in. And who knows if this really sees military adoption or police adoption. It might one day, it might not. But at least it's something unique, and history, look back at the 80s, is filled with kind of weird one-off guns. Think of the Australian Leader, the original Bushmaster gun. Just weird things that didn't go anywhere but have become curiosities and of interest today. Well, let me know. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you very soon.